All right, let's jump right in. We're talking about one of the most brilliant, wide-ranging, and, let's be honest, one of the most puzzling figures of the 12th century, Abraham Ibn Ezra. This guy was a true Renaissance man way before the Renaissance even happened. He was a poet, a grammarian, a biblical commentator, a philosopher, and a scientist, the whole shebang. But underneath that incredible resume, there's a really fascinating paradox. And maybe the best way to get to know the man is with his own words. He wrote this short, witty poem about himself, basically summing up a lifetime of terrible luck. Despite being an absolute genius, Ibn Ezra was always broke. He was totally convinced the stars themselves had it out for him. And right away, that tells you so much about the human being behind this towering intellect. His life was just constant motion. He was born in Spain during its Jewish Golden Age and was even buddies with the famous poet Yehuda Halevi. But then, when he was around 50, he left Spain and just never went back. We still don't really know why. For the next 25 years, he just wandered through Christian Europe, Italy, France, even ended up in England. And here's why that's so important. He basically became this one-man knowledge transfer program. He took all this advanced science and philosophy from Jewish Spain, which was mostly in Arabic, and translated into Hebrew, opening it up for a whole new audience. And this brings us to the real heart of the matter, the central puzzle we're tackling here. When you start digging into his work, this huge tension just pops out. How can one guy be both a detached, logical philosopher and a deeply emotional, spiritual poet? How do those two things even exist in this same person? Okay, so let's break this down. On the one hand, you've got Ibn Ezra the philosopher. This guy's a total rationalist. He sees the universe as this perfectly ordered machine where everything that happens on Earth is basically dictated by the unchangeable movements of the stars. But then on the other hand, you've got Ibn Ezra the poet. And his writing is just overflowing with intense, personal feeling, this deep, spiritual thirst for a real connection with God. I mean, these feel like two totally different people, right? So let's unpack that first side of him, Ibn Ezra, the guy who loved systems, the rational thinker. In his mind, the cosmos had this really neat three-level structure. Down at the bottom, there's our world, the lower world, where everything lives and dies. Then, above us, you've got the world of the stars, this perfect eternal place whose movements control everything down here. And then, way up at the top is the spiritual realm, with angels and ultimately God. And the key thing to get is the hierarchy. The higher levels are in charge of the lower ones. Simple as that. So this whole structure leads him to a huge idea, what we call astral determinism. He was convinced that the big events down here on Earth, we're talking floods, famines, the fate of entire kingdoms, were all predetermined by the stars. Now, you gotta remember, in his time, this wasn't some kind of mystical belief. This was rational science based on math and observation. And he was absolutely committed to this system. Get this, he poses this little thought experiment. Let's say the stars predict a massive flood, but the people in the town repent and pray. Does God stop the flood? Ibn Ezra's answer is a hard no. The system is the system, that river is going to flood, period. So how does God save the good people? Well, divine providence works within the system. It makes sure the righteous folks get an urgent message to leave town right before the disaster hits. They're saved by being removed from the event, not by changing it. But believe it or not, for him, it went even deeper than the stars. It went all the way down to the source code of reality itself. At his core, he was into something called arithmology. Now, this isn't just, your lucky number is 7. This was a serious philosophical idea that the numbers 1 through 9 were the literal building blocks of the entire universe. For Ibn Ezra, the stars and their perfect movements were just an expression of an even deeper mathematical order. Okay, so you have this picture, right? A man of systems, stars, and numbers. A total rationalist. Now, let's completely flip the coin and meet the other Ibn Ezra, the passionate soul searcher. My soul is thirsty for you. I mean, just listen to that line from one of his religious poems. The tone is a complete 180-degree turn from his philosophy. It's not about an impersonal system at all. It's raw, it's emotional, it's deeply personal. This isn't the voice of a scientist observing the universe. It's the voice of someone feeling this incredible, almost painful longing for God. And this wasn't just some side hobby for him. You could argue that his poetry is his most lasting legacy. These poems, just full of spiritual desire, were so powerful and so beloved, they actually became part of the core Jewish prayer book. They're still sung in synagogues all over the world on the holiest days of the year, like Yom Kippur. So, the man of cold, hard systems somehow managed to write the soundtrack for the deepest parts of human faith. All right, so what gives? How in the world do we put these two pieces together? How do we reconcile the man of the stars with the man of the soul? This is the question, isn't it? The one that stumped people for centuries. Was he just a walking contradiction? Did he have his philosopher self and his religious self locked in separate rooms, never to meet? Or is there something deeper connecting them? Well, according to scholars who study him, like Dr. Tzvi Langerman, the big mistake we make is thinking that philosophy and faith had to be enemies. For a thinker like Ibn Ezra, they weren't. Philosophy wasn't there to replace religious feeling. It was a tool. Its job was to make sure that all that powerful, emotional, devotional energy was aimed at the right target. And his own theory about the human soul explains this perfectly. He believed we have 3 souls, kind of like a plant soul for basic functions, an animal soul for instinct, and then at the very top, the rational soul, the neshama. And the whole job of that rational soul is to tell the difference between what's true and what's false. So for him, the goal wasn't to get rid of his religious passion. The goal was to use his reason to purify it. His philosophy made sure his thirst for God wasn't just some vague feeling, but a deep longing for the true source of that perfect, mathematical, star-governed universe he spent his life studying. Reason didn't fight his emotion. It gave it a clear, philosophically sound target to aim for. So in the end, when you put it all together, you're left with a legacy that is every bit as complex and fascinating as the man himself. I mean, his influence is just huge, and you can really see it in 3 big areas. For starters, in biblical commentary, he was a master of grammar and sticking to the plain, simple meaning of the text. Then there's science, where he was a critical figure in making complex ideas about astrology and math accessible to people who only read Hebrew. And of course, his poetry, which made him one of the most beloved voices in all of Jewish prayer. At the end of the day, it's probably better not to think of him as a rigid philosopher like his contemporary Maimonides, who tried to build one single perfect system. Ibn Ezra was something else. He was a brilliant, endlessly curious thinker, a popularizer who was fascinated by all kinds of different ideas and wanted to share them without trying to force them all into one neat little box. And he leaves us with one last bit of mystery, which is just so perfectly him. All through his commentaries, he'll hint at these deeper, hidden secrets, and then he'll end a really tough section by just saying something like, "Those who understand this secret, well, they should keep silent." It's the perfect, tantalizing puzzle from a man who was, and still is, one of history's great, magnificent enigmas.